The Galactic Council chamber was silent. Thousands of alien leaders sat inside the massive circular hall floating above the shining world of Alaris Prime. Blue lights covered the ceiling like stars. Giant hologram screens floated in the air. Military guards stood beside every entrance without moving. Something was wrong. Everyone could feel it. At the center of the chamber stood Supreme Commander Vaylor, leader of the Council Defense Fleet. His black armor reflected the cold lights around him. His sharp silver eyes looked toward the main screen. The human colony on Arinder 9 has refused evacuation orders, Vaylor said calmly. Their transport ships are leaving the planet without Council permission. Some leaders whispered nervously. Others remained quiet. Near the back rows, an old insect-like ambassador slowly lowered his head. Fear filled his ancient yellow eyes. "This is unnecessary," he said carefully. "There are children on those ships." Vaylor did not even look at him. "The colony has been declared hostile," he answered. "No vessel leaves the planet." The old ambassador's hands shook. Around him, several elder races exchanged worried looks. They had lived long enough to remember old stories. Stories younger species believed were myths. Stories about humanity. Far away, deep inside the outer colonies, the mining planet Arinder 9 burned under a dark red sky. Explosions shook the ground. People ran through smoke-filled streets carrying bags, children, and supplies. Emergency alarms screamed from damaged buildings. Above the city, Council warships filled the clouds like giant metal shadows. Inside one crowded transport station, human soldiers pushed civilians toward evacuation ships. "Hurry! Move!" one officer shouted. Children cried while parents tried to calm them. Engines roared outside the massive hangar doors. A little girl, holding a small toy, looked up at her mother. "Are we going home?" she asked softly. Her mother forced a weak smile. "Yes," she whispered. "Soon." The evacuation ship doors began closing. Hundreds of civilians packed tightly inside the transport ship. Families held each other as the engines powered on. Then every light suddenly flickered. The ship stopped moving. Outside, a massive shadow slowly covered the hangar. People looked upward in fear. A gigantic Council warship hovered directly above the station. Its black metal hull blocked the sky. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, everyone watched the live broadcast in complete silence. Commander Vaylor stood with his hands behind his back. "Final warning," an officer said through the speakers. "Power down your engines immediately." The human pilot answered quickly. "There's civilians on board. Children, we are unarmed." Vaylor's face remained cold. One of the elder ambassadors suddenly stood up from his seat. "You cannot do this," he said loudly. "Stop this attack now." Vaylor finally turned toward him. "The Council will maintain order," he replied. The old ambassador's voice became weaker. "You do not understand what will happen." But Vaylor ignored him. Inside the transport ship, panic spread rapidly. Parents pulled children close. Some people prayed. Others cried silently. Then the warship above the station began charging its weapons. Blue energy lit the dark sky. The human pilot screamed through the comm channel. "Please, there are children here." For 1 second, nobody inside the Council chamber moved. Nobody breathed. Then Vaylor gave the order. "Fire!" A bright blue beam fell from the sky. The entire transport ship disappeared in a massive explosion. Flames consumed the station. Shockwaves destroyed nearby buildings. Inside the Council chamber, silence swallowed everything. No one spoke. Several younger leaders stared at the screens without understanding why the older races suddenly looked terrified. The old insect ambassador slowly sat down. His face had gone pale. One by one, elder representatives quietly began leaving the chamber. Vaylor frowned. "Where are you going?" he demanded. None of them answered at first. Then one old reptilian diplomat stopped near the exit doors. His voice was barely above a whisper. "You have doomed us all." The doors closed behind him. Far away on Earth, billions of humans watched the same broadcast. Cities became silent. Factories stopped working. Restaurants, schools, offices, everything paused. Families stared at giant public screens showing the burning wreckage on Arinder 9. No one shouted. No one protested. The silence felt far worse. Deep beneath the mountains of northern Earth, hidden doors slowly opened for the first time in centuries. Dust fell from ancient steel walls. Rows of massive war machines powered on one after another. Red warning lights filled the underground tunnels. A computer voice echoed through the darkness. Protocol Black Sky activated. Far beyond Earth, hidden stations buried inside dead moons suddenly came alive. Frozen shipyards lit up. Secret human fleets powered their engines. Thousands of warships slowly emerged from darkness. Some ships were so large they blocked entire stars. Encrypted signals spread across human space faster than light itself. Only one message repeated again and again. Find everyone responsible. Across the galaxy, panic exploded. Ancient alien governments shut down trade routes immediately. Military fleets retreated to home systems. Several species completely disconnected themselves from galactic communications. Younger civilizations did not understand the fear, but the older races remembered. Long ago, another empire had once harmed human children during a border war. That empire no longer existed. Not one world survived. Not one city remained. Even their history had been erased. That was why the first law existed. Never harm human children. At the edge of known space, an old alien archivist quickly deleted entire star maps from public records. His young assistant watched nervously. "Why are we deleting them?" she asked. The old archivist looked toward the stars with fear in his tired eyes. "Because," he whispered, "humanity is about to remind the galaxy why the first law was created." Back above Valaris Prime, Commander Vaylor stood inside the council chamber watching reports flood the screens. Human ambassadors had vanished from every council world. Human trade ships were returning home. Military satellites across Earth had gone offline. Then a new signal suddenly appeared on the central screen. Unknown origin. Unknown fleet. The transmission contained only one sentence. The message spread across the galaxy within hours. "We are coming." Nobody knew where the signal came from. Nobody could trace it. But every leader, soldier, merchant, and citizen heard those three words. And suddenly, the entire galaxy became afraid. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, emergency meetings continued without rest. Giant hologram screens flashed with warnings from hundreds of star systems. Human ships were disappearing. Trade routes were shutting down. Entire human colonies had stopped responding to outside communication. Commander Vaylor stood at the center of the chamber, trying to remain calm. "They are bluffing," he said firmly. Humanity cannot challenge the full power of the Council. But many leaders no longer believed him, especially the older races. Near the back of the chamber, the old insect ambassador remained silent. His hands trembled as he watched new reports appear across the screens. Then another warning arrived. Human military activity detected near the outer sectors. A younger alien senator stood quickly. "So what?" he snapped. "We outnumber them 10-1. The old ambassador slowly looked at him. "That will not matter," he whispered. The young senator laughed nervously. But nobody else did. Far away, deep inside human space, Earth remained completely silent. No speeches came from human leaders. No threats. No public anger. That silence frightened the galaxy more than war. Above Earth, giant defense stations rotated slowly around the planet. Thousands of hidden satellites powered online one after another. In underground bunkers, old commanders returned to duty after many peaceful years. Inside one massive control room beneath the Arctic ice, Admiral Ethan Graves walked through dark steel hallways surrounded by military officers. He was old now. Gray hair covered his head, and deep scars marked his face. But his cold eyes still looked dangerous. As he entered the command center, every officer stood immediately. Large hologram maps showed the entire galaxy. Red markers spread across dozens of star systems. An officer spoke carefully. "Protocol Black Sky is now active, sir." Graves nodded once. "How many fleets are awake?" 17 confirmed. More are still responding. Another officer looked nervous. "The Council fleets are moving toward human borders." Admiral Graves stared silently at the screens. Then he spoke words that made the entire room quiet. Let them come closer. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, fear continued spreading. On the trade world of Korvax, alien merchants rushed to leave the planet. Spaceports became crowded with ships trying to escape before war started. Inside a crowded station bar, people argued loudly while news screens played the Rinder 9 attack again and again. They killed children, one trader whispered. Another shook his head. The council crossed a line. A third man looked confused. Why is everyone so afraid of humans? The room became silent. Then an old alien pilot slowly placed his drink down. I was alive during the Carthan War, he said quietly. Everyone turned toward him. The Carthan Empire bombed a human refugee convoy almost 200 years ago. The pilot's voice became weaker. There were children on board. Someone swallowed nervously. What happened next? The old pilot stared toward the stars outside the station windows. For 40 years, he whispered, humanity hunted them. No one spoke. The Carthan Empire had over 5,000 worlds, he continued. The humans destroyed every single one. A young merchant laughed nervously. That's impossible. The pilot slowly looked at him. Then why do you think the first law exists? Fear spread through the room. Back inside council space, military fleets prepared for battle. Thousands of warships gathered near human territory. Giant cannons powered on. Fighters filled massive carrier bays. Commander Vaylor personally inspected the fleet from the bridge of his flagship, Judgment. A nervous officer approached him carefully. Sir, several allied races are withdrawing their forces. Vaylor frowned. Cowards. They say they will not fight humanity over this incident. Vaylor's expression darkened. It was necessary, he replied coldly. Human colonies were becoming unstable. But, sir, the officer hesitated. There were children. Vaylor turned sharply. Do not question my orders. The officer immediately stepped back. Still, fear remained visible in his eyes. Far away, hidden in deep space, something massive slowly moved through darkness. No lights, no signals, no visible weapons. Just enormous black warships gliding silently between stars. Entire fleets traveled together without communication. Inside one command ship, human officers watched the galaxy through holographic displays. A young officer looked toward Admiral Graves. Sir, should we send the council another warning? Graves remained silent for several seconds. Then he answered quietly. They already received one. Back on Earth, families gathered inside their homes watching endless news reports. Schools closed across the planet. Military transports filled the skies. Yet nobody panicked. The mood felt different. Cold, focused. A little boy sat beside his grandfather watching the stars through a window. Grandpa, the boy asked softly, are we going to war? The old man remained quiet for a moment. Then he answered, no. The child looked confused. But everyone says war is coming. The grandfather's eyes slowly hardened. This stopped being a war the moment they attacked children. Elsewhere in the galaxy, strange events began happening. Council listening stations near the outer rim suddenly lost contact with nearby patrol fleets. Cargo ships disappeared without distress signals. Military outposts went dark one after another. No battles, no explosions, just silence. Inside the council chamber, panic slowly began replacing confidence. We lost another station, an officer reported. How? Vaylor demanded. We don't know. Another officer rushed forward. 3 destroyers vanished near the Orion Rift. Destroyed. No debris was found. The room became silent. Then all lights inside the chamber suddenly flickered. For one terrifying second, every screen turned black. When the systems returned, a single symbol appeared across every monitor. A human black eagle. Below it were only 6 words. You were warned. Leave human space. Several council members immediately stood up in fear. One ambassador shouted angrily, we must surrender the commanders responsible. Vaylor slammed his fist onto the table. The council does not surrender. But even he no longer sounded confident. At the edge of known space, Hidden behind dead stars and black nebula clouds, humanity's true fleet finally gathered together. Thousands of warships waited in total darkness. Some were ancient, some were newly built. All of them were ready for war. Then Admiral Graves stepped onto the bridge of the largest human flagship. The massive vessel slowly powered its engines. Blue light filled the darkness. One by one, the rest of the fleet followed. Across space, millions of soldiers waited for the order. Graves looked toward the stars ahead, toward the Galactic Council. Then he gave the command. Move the fleet forward. The galaxy stopped sleeping. Every news network, every military station, every government world watched the same terrifying reports. Human fleets were moving. Nobody knew their exact numbers. Nobody knew their full strength. And that frightened the galaxy more than anything else. Near the outer borders of Council space, defense stations scanned the darkness endlessly. Soldiers remained awake for days inside cold military bunkers. Commanders waited nervously for the first attack. But the humans did not rush. They moved slowly, silently, like predators surrounding wounded prey. Inside the Council flagship Judgment, Commander Vaylor stood before a giant hologram map filled with flashing red warning symbols. Lost contact with another patrol fleet. An officer reported. Vaylor's jaw tightened. Where? Sector 9 near the Orion Rift. How many ships? 12 destroyers, sir. Vaylor turned sharply. Destroyed by what? The officer hesitated. We don't know. Fear quietly spread across the bridge. Entire fleets were vanishing without battles. No distress calls. No wreckage. Nothing. It was as if ships simply disappeared into darkness. Far away, inside the frozen asteroid fortress of Helio Station, Council soldiers prepared for possible attack. The massive station protected an important hyperspace gate, leading directly toward the Council capital. Heavy cannons aimed toward space. Fighter pilots waited inside launch bays. General Torvak, commander of the station, watched sensor reports carefully. Any sign of human fleets? He asked. A scanner officer shook his head. Nothing, sir. Torvak frowned. Humans don't just vanish. Suddenly, every light inside the station flickered once. Then the alarm started screaming. Unknown objects detected. Torvak stepped forward quickly. Where? The officer's face turned pale. Inside the defense perimeter. The room froze. That's impossible, someone whispered. Huge hologram screens lit up. Black warships had appeared directly beside the station. No warp signatures. No warning. 1 second. Empty space. The next second, human ships surrounded Helio Station completely. The soldiers stared in horror. The human vessels looked strange. Dark, sharp, almost invisible against space itself. No lights covered their hulls. No military symbols appeared on their surfaces. Only one thing could be seen clearly. A silver eagle. Then the human fleet opened fire. Blue beams tore through the station's shields instantly. Explosions shook the massive structure. Council fighters launched into battle, but many disappeared before even firing their weapons. Human ships moved like ghosts. Fast, precise, deadly. Inside the station, panic spread through corridors. Emergency lights flashed red, while soldiers ran toward defensive positions. Torvak grabbed a communication device. Send distress calls to the Council fleet. An officer looked terrified. Communications are jammed. Another explosion shook the station violently. Part of the ceiling collapsed nearby. Outside, the battle became a massacre. Human ships targeted weapon systems first, then engines, then command centers. Never civilians, never escape pods, only military targets. That detail frightened the older alien races even more. Humanity was still controlling its anger, and controlled anger was far worse. Inside the Council chamber on Valaris Prime, leaders watched live combat footage from Helio Station. Many looked horrified. The younger races could not believe what they were seeing. Entire defense fleets destroyed within minutes. One senator shouted angrily, "This is impossible. No fleet can fight like that." The old insect ambassador lowered his eyes sadly. "Yes," he whispered, "humans can." Commander Vaylor stood silently while officers flooded him with terrible reports. We've lost shield control. Docking ring destroyed. Enemy ships inside the station. Vaylor clenches fists. Deploy reinforcements immediately. But another officer looked up nervously. Sir, nearby fleets are refusing orders. What? They won't engage the humans. The chamber exploded with shouting. Cowards. Traitors. Panic spread everywhere. Then suddenly, the Helio Station broadcast changed. The battle footage disappeared. A single human figure appeared on every screen across the galaxy. A human admiral wearing black military armor. Admiral Ethan Graves. He looked calm, cold. Behind him burned the remains of Helio Station. When he finally spoke, his voice echoed through every world watching. You murdered children. Nothing else. The transmission ended. But those 4 words spread fear across the galaxy faster than any threat, because humans were not demanding surrender. They were not asking for peace. They were delivering judgment. Far from the battle, civilian worlds began preparing for disaster. Spaceports filled with refugees. Shops closed. Banks collapsed. Rumors spread faster every hour. Some said humanity had hidden fleets larger than entire alien empires. Others claimed ancient human weapons could destroy stars. Nobody knew what was true anymore, but everyone believed one thing. The Council had made a terrible mistake. On Earth, military production never stopped. Massive factories worked day and night. Warships left hidden shipyards every hour. Young soldiers boarded transports quietly while families watched in silence. No cheering, no celebration, only determination. Inside a small home near the coast of New Sydney City, a woman watched the war reports while her young daughter slept beside her. The screen showed burning council fleets, human ships advancing. Fear spread across alien worlds. The woman closed her eyes for a moment. Her husband stood near the window, wearing military uniform armor. "You're leaving tonight?" she asked softly. He nodded once. Neither of them smiled. The little girl suddenly woke up. "Dad." The soldier walked over quietly. She looked at him with sleepy eyes. "Are the bad people gone?" For the first time that night, emotion appeared on his face. He gently touched her hair. "Soon," he whispered. Back in deep space, humanity's main fleet continued moving toward Council territory. Thousands upon thousands of ships crossed the stars together. Like a storm, inside the flagship Resolute, Admiral Graves studied new battle reports. "Helio Station secured," an officer announced. "Civilian casualties?" "0. Graves nodded slightly. Another officer stepped forward. "Several Council worlds are offering surrender." "Accepted." Graves answered immediately. "What about military resistance?" His cold eyes lifted toward the hologram SD. Inside the judgment, he stared at the endless reports of defeat surrounding him. Entire stations lost. Fleets retreating. Allied species abandoning the Council. Then the newest report arrived. The officer reading it looked pale. "Sir, the human fleet has entered the Caraxis sector." The bridge became silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Caraxis was the greatest military fortress in the galaxy. Millions of soldiers, planetary shields, defense cannons powerful enough to destroy moons. If Caraxis fell, nothing would stop humanity from reaching the Council capital itself. Vaylor slowly turned toward the stars outside his command window. For the first time since the war began, fear finally entered his eyes. And far away, hidden inside the darkness between stars, the Ghost Fleet kept moving forward. The fortress world of Caraxis prepared for war. Massive defense cannons rose from deep underground bunkers. Millions of soldiers filled trenches, towers, and shield stations across the planet. In orbit above the world, thousands of Council warships formed endless defensive lines. Caraxis had never fallen before. For centuries, the galaxy believed the planet was impossible to conquer. Now its people waited in fear, because humanity was coming. Inside the Central Command Tower, Commander Vaylor studied the battlefield holograms with tired eyes. Red warning signals covered almost every nearby sector. Human fleets were advancing too fast. Entire Council defenses were collapsing within hours. And worst of all, The humans still showed no mercy toward military targets, but they never attacked civilians. That frightened the older races deeply. It meant humanity was not fighting blindly. They were fully in control. An officer rushed toward Vaylor. "Sir, long-range scanners have detected the main human fleet." The room became silent. "How many ships?" Vaylor asked carefully. The officer swallowed nervously. We cannot count them all." A cold feeling spread across the command center. Huge hologram screens lit up. Darkness filled the stars beyond Caraxis. At first, it looked like empty space. Then people realized those shadows were ships. Thousands of them, maybe more. Silent black warships slowly moved together like a giant wall of darkness, swallowing the stars themselves. Some alien soldiers watching the screens began shaking. Others whispered prayers. Near the back of the command room, the old insect ambassador stared at the fleet with sadness in his ancient eyes. "I warned you," he whispered quietly. Vaylor ignored him. "All fleets prepare for combat," he ordered loudly. "Caraxis will hold." Across the fortress world, alarms screamed endlessly. Fighter pilots rushed toward launch bays. Heavy plasma cannons charged with glowing blue energy. Orbital shields activated around the entire planet. Then the humans arrived. The stars disappeared behind black metal warships. Human vessels surrounded Caraxis completely. No messages came. No demands. Only silence. Inside the human flagship Resolute, Admiral Ethan Graves stood beside the bridge windows, looking down at the heavily defended world. An officer approached carefully. "Sir, Council channels are requesting negotiation." Graves remained silent. Another officer spoke. "Should we answer?" The Admiral finally looked toward the glowing planet below. They had their chance. Moments later, the battle began. Human warships fired first. Blue beams crossed space like lightning. The orbital shields around Caraxis shook violently. Council cannons answered immediately, filling space with explosions and burning debris. Thousands of ships clashed across the stars. But something quickly became clear. The humans were stronger, much stronger. Council commanders watched in horror as human ships moved through defensive fire with terrifying precision. Entire fleets vanished within minutes. Human weapons struck only military targets. Shield generators, weapon stations, fleet carriers. Every attack was perfect. No wasted shots. No hesitation. Inside the Caraxis command center, panic spread rapidly. Western defense line destroyed. Orbital station 7 lost. Enemy ships entering lower atmosphere. Vaylor slammed his fist onto the command console. "Deploy reserve fleets now." But another officer looked terrified. "Sir, there are no reserve fleets left." For the first time, complete silence filled the room. Outside, giant human warships descended into the skies of Caraxis itself. Dark shadows covered entire cities. Then millions across the galaxy received an emergency broadcast. Not from the Council, from humanity. The screen showed an old recording from nearly 200 years earlier. Grainy footage, burning ships, dead civilians floating in space, and children. A calm human voice began speaking over the recording. This was the Carthan incident. Across the galaxy, younger races watched in confusion. Most had never seen this footage before. The voice continued. During humanity's early expansion, the Carthan Empire attacked an unarmed refugee convoy. The video showed destroyed transport ships drifting through darkness. There were 11,000 civilians on board. Then the voice became colder. For thousands were children. Silence spread everywhere. Even soldiers stopped fighting for a moment to watch. The footage changed again. Now it showed human fleets. Massive warships burning entire planets. Cities disappearing under nuclear fire. Alien fleets shattered into debris. The Carthan Empire believed humanity would surrender after losing its children. More images appeared. Dead worlds. Destroyed moons. Empty star systems. They were wrong. Inside bars, homes, military stations, and government halls, billions watched silently as the truth behind the first law finally became public. For 40 years, humanity hunted the Carthan Empire across the galaxy. No peace treaty stopped them. No surrender ended the war. Human fleets destroyed every military target. then every government center, then every remaining fleet, until nothing remained. The human voice spoke one final sentence. The first law was not created to protect humans. The screen faded to black. Then new words appeared. It was created to protect the galaxy from humanity. Fear exploded everywhere. On Caraxis, many council soldiers began abandoning their positions. Some refused orders completely. Others surrendered immediately. The younger races finally understood why older civilizations fear humans so deeply. Humanity did not forget, and humanity did not forgive attacks on children. Inside the council chamber on Valaris Prime, chaos erupted. Leaders shouted over each other in panic. We must surrender. End this war now. Give them Commander Vaylor. But Vaylor stood frozen before the screens. For the first time, he fully understood what he had unleashed. Not soldiers, not fleets, but the oldest rage inside humanity itself. Then another report arrived. The officer reading it looked pale with fear. Caraxis' orbital shield has collapsed. The chamber went silent. Moments later, another report followed. Human forces have entered the capital city. Outside the windows of the command tower on Caraxis, flames covered the horizon. Council warships crashed in the sky. Defense cannons exploded one after another. The fortress world was dying, yet the humans still avoided civilian districts. That terrified everyone even more, because it meant humanity was choosing exactly who deserved punishment. Inside the burning streets of Caraxis Prime, human soldiers finally marched through the city. Black armor, silver eagle symbols, cold expressions. Council troops surrendered everywhere without fighting. A young alien soldier dropped his weapon and stared at a human commander approaching him. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered fearfully. The human officer stopped. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he answered quietly, "Because your leaders murdered children." The soldier lowered his eyes in shame. High above the burning world, Admiral Graves watched the battle nearing its end. An officer approached him carefully. "Caraxis' defenses have fully collapsed, sir." Graves nodded slowly. "What about Commander Vaylor?" "He escaped toward the council capital." The admiral's eyes narrowed slightly. "Let him run." The officer looked confused. "Sir." Graves turned toward the stars ahead, toward Valaris Prime, toward the Galactic Council itself. He needs to see what comes next. And across the galaxy, fear continued spreading, because humanity was no longer coming. Humanity had already arrived. The galaxy was burning. For the first time in thousands of years, the mighty Galactic Council was collapsing before everyone's eyes. Its fleets were shattered. Its fortress worlds had fallen. Its allies were abandoning it one by one. And now, humanity was moving toward the council capital itself, Valaris Prime, the center of galactic power, the home of the leaders who had ruled the stars for centuries. Across the planet, fear spread through every street and tower. Emergency sirens screamed day and night. Civilian transports crowded the skies trying to escape before the human fleet arrived. But many ships never left. Human warships already surrounded the system. Thousands of black vessels floated silently around the planet, like dark shadows waiting for judgment. Inside the massive council chamber, panic had replaced pride. Leaders shouted over each other, while military officers rushed through the halls, carrying terrible reports. "We lost contact with the Northern Fleet. Defense satellites are offline. 3 more systems surrendered to humanity." Commander Vaylor stood near the center platform, exhausted and furious. "Hold your positions," he shouted. "The council still stands." But even he no longer believed those words. The chamber doors suddenly opened. The old insect ambassador slowly walked inside. Unlike everyone else, he looked calm, sad, but calm. Vaylor turned toward him angrily. "You," he growled. "You knew this would happen." The old ambassador nodded once. "Yes." "Then why didn't you stop them?" The old being stared directly into Vaylor's eyes. "Because humanity warned us centuries ago." Silence filled the chamber. The ambassador slowly stepped forward. "The first law was simple," he continued quietly. "Never harm human children." His voice became heavier. Not because humans are weak, not because they are emotional. He looked toward the burning stars outside the chamber windows. But because when humans lose their children, something inside them changes. Nobody spoke. Even the frightened senators remained silent. The old ambassador lowered his head. And now it has happened again. Far above Alaris Prime, the human flagship, Resolute moved slowly toward the planet. Behind it stretched the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen. Countless warships filled the darkness. Inside the bridge, Admiral Ethan Graves stood quietly while officers prepared for final assault. Council defense grid detected. One officer reported, holding fire. Another said, Graves studied the glowing planet below. Millions of civilians still live there. Families, workers, children. He finally spoke. Target military systems only. Yes, sir. Another officer looked uncertain. Sir, some commanders believe total planetary bombardment would end the war faster. The bridge became silent. Graves slowly turned toward the officer. His cold eyes alone were enough to make the young man nervous. We are not them, the admiral said quietly. The officer lowered his head immediately. Moments later, humanity attacked. Blue beams crossed space like storms of light. Council defense satellites exploded instantly. Orbital cannons vanished one after another. The skies above Alaris Prime became filled with fire. Thousands of Council ships charged forward desperately. The final battle had begun. Explosions shook space endlessly. Burning wreckage crashed into the atmosphere below. Fighter ships moved through giant walls of plasma fire, while massive cruisers shattered under human attacks. Yet humanity kept advancing. Slowly, relentlessly, like an unstoppable tide. Inside the Council capital city, civilians watched the battle from underground shelters. Children cried while emergency broadcasts repeated across every screen. Then suddenly, all transmission stopped. Every screen turned black. A single silver eagle appeared. Humanity had hacked the entire planetary network. Moments later, the footage from Arinder 9 appeared again. The destroyed transport ship, the screaming civilians, the children. This time, every person on Valaris Prime was forced to watch. In silence, exactly as humanity had watched it. Inside the council chamber, Commander Vaylor stared at the screens with pale eyes. For the first time since the war began, guilt finally appeared on his face. The old insect ambassador looked toward him sadly. Now you understand, he whispered. Outside, the battle grew worse. Human forces landed directly inside the capital city. Black armored soldiers moved through government districts while council troops surrendered everywhere. Many no longer wanted to fight. Some soldiers even removed their weapons and waited silently for arrest. The war was already over in their minds. Inside the streets, frightened civilians watched human troops pass by, but the humans ignored them completely. They attacked only military targets, government buildings, defense centers, council command towers. The precision terrified everyone. Humanity was angry, but still controlled, and that made them even more dangerous. Inside the underground military bunker beneath the council chamber, Vaylor finally received the worst report yet. Sir, an officer whispered fearfully, the planetary shield has collapsed. Vaylor closed his eyes. Another officer rushed forward seconds later. Human forces have entered the Senate district. The room became silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The humans were here. Vaylor slowly sat down. For the first time in his life, he looked old, defeated, broken. One senator looked toward him desperately. What do we do now? Vaylor stared blankly at the burning city shown on the screens. Then finally he whispered, we surrender. But before the order could spread, the chamber lights suddenly shut off. Darkness filled the hall. Panic spread instantly. Then heavy metal doors exploded open. Human soldiers entered the chamber. Black armor covered their bodies. Silver eagle symbols glowed faintly on their shoulders. No one moved. No one resisted. The soldiers stepped aside, and Admiral Ethan Graves walked into the chamber. The room felt colder immediately. Vaylor slowly stood. The two leaders stared at each other across the ruined chamber. For several long seconds, Nobody spoke. Then Vaylor finally lowered his head. "I was trying to protect the galaxy," he said weakly. Graves looked at him without emotion. "You destroyed a ship full of children." Vaylor swallowed hard. "We didn't know humanity would respond like this." The Admiral's face remained cold. "That is exactly why the first law existed." Silence returned. Outside the chamber windows, the skies of Alaris Prime burned red. The Galactic Council was finished. Vaylor looked around the ruined hall one last time. Everything the Council built over centuries had fallen apart in only a few days. Finally, he spoke quietly. "What happens now?" Admiral Graves answered without hesitation. "Now," he said calmly, "the galaxy learns why humanity created the first law." And far across the stars, billions waited in fear for what humanity would do next. The war was over, but the galaxy still felt frozen in fear. Across thousands of worlds, people watched the fall of the Galactic Council again and again through endless news broadcasts. Burning fleets drifted through space. The once powerful council chamber stood dark and broken, and in the center of it all stood humanity, victorious, but silent. That silence frightened the galaxy more than the war itself. On Belarus Prime, smoke still rose from damaged towers while human soldiers secured the last military zones. Emergency rescue ships moved through the skies carrying wounded civilians to safety. Human medics treated alien civilians beside human refugees without discrimination. Food stations opened across the capital city. Shelters received power again. Water systems were repaired. The people of Alaris Prime slowly realized something impossible. Humanity had defeated the Council, but they were not destroying innocent worlds. Inside one damaged shelter, an alien mother held her frightened child while watching human soldiers distribute medical supplies nearby. The child looked nervous. "Aren't humans angry?" he whispered. The mother looked toward the soldiers carefully. "Yes," she answered softly. "Then why are they helping us?" She had no answer. Far above the planet, inside the human flagship Resolute, Admiral Ethan Graves stood before a large observation window, staring at the stars. The war should have felt like victory, but it didn't. An officer entered quietly. "Sir, all remaining Council fleets have surrendered." Graves nodded once. "What about civilian casualties?" "Lower than expected. Relief teams are active across the capital." The officer hesitated before speaking again. "And Commander Vaylor is ready for transport." For several seconds, Graves remained silent. Then he finally turned around. "Bring him." Minutes later, Vaylor entered the chamber under heavy guard. The proud commander who once controlled the greatest military in the galaxy now looked exhausted and broken. His uniform was damaged. Dark circles covered his eyes. He slowly looked around the bridge filled with human officers. None of them looked angry. That somehow felt worse. Vaylor's eyes finally stopped on Graves. "You won," he said quietly. Graves answered calmly. This was never about winning. Vaylor lowered his head. For the first time, regret fully appeared on his face. "I thought humanity had become soft," he admitted. "Peaceful. Weak." The Admiral walked slowly toward him. "We became civilized," Graves replied coldly. "There's a difference." The room fell silent. Vaylor looked toward the stars outside the window. "So what happens to me now?" "You stand trial." Vaylor gave a bitter smile. "And after that?" Graves stared at him without emotion. "That depends on the families of the children you murdered." Those words hit harder than any weapon. Vaylor said nothing else. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, something unexpected began happening. Worlds that once feared humanity started broadcasting messages of support. Some species openly apologized for supporting the Council. Others offered aid to human colonies damaged during the war. Even former enemies began lowering their weapons. The older races understood what humanity had truly done. Humans could have burned entire civilizations. They had the power. Everyone had seen it. But instead, they stopped after punishing those responsible. That choice changed everything. On Earth, millions gathered in silence as the names of the children lost on a render. 9 were read across every city. No celebrations happened. No victory parades. Only mourning. In New Geneva Memorial Plaza, thousands stood beneath falling rain, while giant hologram candles floated through the night sky. Families held pictures of lost loved ones. Soldiers stood silently beside civilians. And in the center of the plaza, a massive stone monument had already been built. 27 names were carved into black marble. 27 children. A little girl placed white flowers beside the memorial while her father knelt next to her. "Why did they hurt the children?" she asked quietly. The man struggled to answer. Finally, he whispered, "Because they forgot we were human." Far away, inside the remains of the old Galactic Council chamber, surviving alien leaders gathered once again. But this time, humanity stood among them, not as conquerors, as witnesses. The old insect ambassador slowly stepped forward before the assembly. His ancient voice echoed through the ruined hall. For centuries, the first law protected the galaxy. He looked toward the human representatives. We forgot why it existed. Many leaders lowered their heads in shame. The ambassador continued. The law was never about fear. He paused. It was about protecting innocence. Silence filled the chamber. Then a new declaration appeared across every screen in the galaxy. The first law would remain forever. No government, no military, no species would ever again be allowed to target children during war. Not human, not alien, not anyone. And this time, the punishment for breaking that law would belong to the entire galaxy. The declaration spread across billions of worlds within minutes. For the first time since the war began, hope slowly returned. Months later, reconstruction continued across damaged systems. Human engineers helped rebuild alien cities. Trade routes reopened. Refugees finally returned home. But some scars never healed. On the outer colony world of Arinder, 9, the destroyed transport station still remained untouched. Not repaired. Not removed. It became a memorial. Every year, ships from across the galaxy traveled there in silence. To remember, one evening, Admiral Graves visited the memorial alone. The ruined metal structure still overlooked the burning red sky of the colony world. Wind moved quietly through the empty station corridors. Near the center platform stood the remains of a child's small toy, melted during the explosion. Graves stared at it silently. A young officer standing nearby finally spoke. "Do you think the galaxy learned its lesson, sir?" The Admiral remained quiet for a long moment. Then he slowly looked toward the stars above. "I think," he answered softly, "they finally remembered it. Far above Arinder, 9, countless stars filled the darkness. Peace had returned. But now the galaxy understood something it had forgotten long ago. Humanity could be kind. Humanity could forgive. Humanity could build wonders across the stars. But if someone harmed their children, even the galaxy itself would tremble.